We are live from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios and on the radio at 98.7 Walk by Faith and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. Hope everyone is having a great night. It's cold in Lubbock today. We had us a cold front move in, and it's just perfect for a fire tonight. We got a baseball game in town. The Longhorns are in town to play the Red Raiders tonight, and it's going to be great. After the show is over, we go home, start a fire, have some supper, watch the ball game, and wreck them. That's what I got to say about that. So we are Red Raiders here at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, through and through, from top to bottom, red and black all the way. It's just the way we roll. So hope you guys out there are hope you're enjoying your night. We've had a great week at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. Some really cool stuff is happening, good healing going on. And, we'd like to bring it to you on this show. We'd like to talk about it. We'd like to share the stuff that's going on. And we've had some good shows. I hope last night's show worked out good for you. Remember, if you're out there listening to us on the radio and you want to go and if you missed something or you want to replay something, go to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, or our X page, and you can replay any of these shows. They're there for you to do that. If you have a question tonight, send it to us on our text line, 806-794-0400. I'd be glad to answer any of your questions. It's spring break for a lot of kids here in Lubbock, and Texas Tech's on spring break. The schools are on spring break. I don't know about where you are in your part of the world, if you're on spring break. So all you guys that are out there traveling, I hope you have safe travels. Hope you make it home and back, and everything is safe and goes your way. And hope you have a good time and get some rest, and get ready to finish up the school year. And yeah. It's time for health, right? It's time for health. This little cold front's going to move through this weekend. Hopefully be back to normal. Don't forget, we are springing forward this weekend for all you guys out there that love the time change. And I said it the other day. I said, man, I just get irritated when I lose an hour. And then I started thinking about that, and I actually don't lose an hour. You really don't lose any time off of your life. Actually, right? We don't lose an hour. We don't gain an hour. We live the same exact amount of time, one way or the other, irrelevant if we turn the clocks one way or one way or the other. So, but one thing that is very serious about this time of year is that every time when we do have a time change like that, heart attacks increase. There's all kinds of disruption that goes on, depression. There can be all kinds of things that happen in your health. So be aware of that. If you have a chance, get to sleep early. I was listening this morning to a cool study. I don't have it with me tonight because I was watching it. I think I was watching it on YouTube or Instagram. I don't remember, but we went through all those people that I follow on Instagram last night. And one of the guys was talking about a study done with sleep at Stanford. And, Stanford, those guys could do studies. They're all about that type of stuff. And they increased, I think, 2 hours. They increased the Stanford basketball team 2 hours and got multiple positive results out of that right there. Just by increasing their sleep 2 hours a night. I think their free throw percentage went up like 9 percentage points, and their three-point shooting went up 9 percentage points, and their cortisol levels dropped. And there were a couple other ones. I can't remember exactly what the other markers that they had, but all those things just from getting 2 extra hours of sleep. So you know that the clocks are going to change. We're going to lose that hour from on the clock this weekend. So if you have a chance, try to go ahead and get caught up. It wouldn't be a bad idea to get caught up tonight. Get yourself some sleep tonight, and so that you can just keep your health going, right? Don't let the time change make your health go into chaos. So just thought I'd mention that to us tonight. Last night we talked about changes in blood flow in the brain, and how we can cause problems, especially in that brain stem, when we start to have disruption vascularly in the brainstem, right? And I mentioned this article last night that we put in every single new patient folder. When a patient comes in, we've mentioned it before, but they get a folder with all their stuff printed out. And I mentioned it last night, the article, and I just thought I'd pull it out real quickly. Don't want to go all the way through it because I got some other things that I want to talk about tonight. But decreased vertebral artery hemodynamics in patients with loss of cervical lordosis. What does that mean? Decrease vertebral artery, the artery that takes blood to your head, the changes in the blood flow, the blood volume, all that sort of thing in patients that lose their cervical curve. What we're supposed to have a cervical curve, we're supposed to have a good curve in our neck. And the background here says, because loss of cervical lordosis leads to disruptive biomechanics, changes in the way that your body moves, the natural lordotic curvature is considered to be an ideal posture for the cervical spine. The vertebral arteries proceed in the transverse foramen of each cervical vertebrae. Out here to the side, you've got these little holes that are in the bone, and your vertebral artery is going through there. Considering that the vertebral arteries travel in close anatomical relationship to the cervical spine, we speculated that the loss of cervical lordosis may affect vertebral artery hemodynamics, the dynamics of how the blood's moving, right? The aim of the study was to compare the vertebral artery values between subjects with and without loss of cervical lordosis, meaning your cervical curve. And the conclusion is, the present study revealed a significant association between loss of cervical lordosis and decreased vertebral artery hemodynamics, including diameter, flow volume, and peak systolic velocity. So keep it in that, just keep that in mind right there, that you have changes, because remember what we mentioned last night was you get that vagus nerve involved. And we've talked about that lots of times when you get that lower brain escape. And lower brain escape happens after upper brain exhaustion. So your upper brain, your parietal lobe, and especially your frontal lobe and your prefrontal cortex gets exhausted, and that basically shuts it off from it. It dampens its ability to dampen. That's repetitive. It changes the way that your upper brain keeps your lower brain calm and quiet. And if your lower brain, which is, if remember you go back, we stack all this stuff. It just stacks and stacks and stacks. And it's just like elementary school. It just keeps stacking, right? We're born with that very primitive brain, very simple brain on the day that we're born. Then as we start to develop and we get that limbic system going and we kind of get that nurturing or not nurturing happening in our lives, we develop the lower brain, which we call the emotional brain. And then as we start to go through our teens into our early 20s, then we really start to develop that upper brain, which we call our rational brain. And our rational brain dampens our emotional brain. A rational person, a good frontal cortex person, a person that has good upper brain activity is more peaceful, is more calm, is less emotional than a person that has lower upper brain activity. So we want that rational brain to work, right? But when it doesn't dampen that lower brain, and the lower brain escapes and gets the vagus nerve involved. And the vagus nerve is what innervates our organ system. And that's how we use autonomic information, parasympathetic and sympathetic information, to control our organ systems. That's why we use the heart rate variability here in the office to try to determine how the autonomic nervous system is working. That's why we do the things that we do in our exams, and that all this stuff just stacks on top of each other, right? So last night what we learned is we went over again how the left vagus nerve is firing to the heart, and the right vagus nerve is firing to the pancreas, along with other things, but they're not symmetrical. So in the article we read last night, they're asymmetrical. The right vagus nerve has a more affinity to fire to the pancreas and can affect type 2 diabetes. Right? That was the article that we had last night. Yep, right here. Type 2 diabetes, central nervous system etiology, and the points that were pointed out right there about the right side and the left side. Type 2 diabetes is associated with arterial pulsatile compression of the right anterior lateral medulla oblongata, which appears to be an important etiological factor. So it's on that right side. The left vagus nerve controls the heart, and compression causes essential hypertension. The right vagus nerve controls the pancreas and glycemic control. The right lateral medulla syndrome. This is in Surgical Neurology International, and this was July 16th, 2010. Okay, so we talked about that, talked about the cervical curve thing. So I had a patient today that just needed a consultation. So we had a consultation today, and the person has got some really challenging things going on, and challenging things going on in her life, and but she's also had multiple low back and pelvis surgeries, and she was talking to me about what I thought she ought to do about it. And we had a really good conversation, I think, about some things and about how we should proceed and what she's doing, and so we got into discussing those same things that we discuss on the radio show every night. We got into discussing some of those issues, and it just keeps it stacks on top of itself, and we repeat the things over and over. But we got into the whole idea of why she had the back surgery in the first place, and what was happening in her low back, and why was it deteriorating, and she had degenerative disc disease, remember? And they told her she had arthritis, and they told her all these things about why her low back was hurting. And they told her it was genetic, and they told her that it was hormonal, and they told her that it was that it was degenerative, and all those sort of things. And what she ended up with was back surgery. Well, now it's a mess. It's a mess because of those things. And I just think it's so important that we kind of understand those things. And I showed her x-rays of degeneration with no pain. I showed her some x-rays of people that of course, we didn't, these are old x-rays and things of people that I've had in the past, but there was no names or anything, just pictures we were talking about. But to show everyone that what that means about the degeneration and the pain. And so I thought tonight what we would do is I don't want to necessarily go back through the degeneration, but I just don't buy that whole deal. I don't think it's true. I don't think degeneration is not arthritis. Degeneration is degeneration. Arthritis is inflammation of the joint. Degeneration is a physical deterioration of the soft tissue and the bone, the disc, the bone, the associated anatomy that goes along with that. That's what degeneration is. And I really wish that all the people in the world that take care of people would stop telling them that those two things are the same. And I wish all the people in the world that took care of people would stop telling them that the reason that their back hurts is because of their degeneration, because it's not always true. It can be true in some extreme circumstances. It can be true, but it's not always true. It's two different separate things. And doctors do it every single day. Chiropractors do it every single day. Nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and surgeons and all kinds of stuff. They'll look at an x-ray, they'll see degeneration, they'll tell the patient that they have arthritis. The patient believes now that the reason that their back hurts is because it's degenerative, and that whole thing is not true. So then if you believe that, and then you believe that your pain is associated to your degeneration, and then you immediately fall for the idea that you should have back surgery. And then you have back surgery, and now you got pain running down your leg and down into your foot, and your big toe is on fire. And now it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? We're going to give you another shot. We're going to give you another shot. Now we're going to put a stimulator in your spine, and all hell's going to break loose when that thing happens. So I thought we would talk about tonight, again, I just pull out some pain articles. I would pull out some pain articles, and some of them are kind of right off the press about inflammation, pain, neuropathic pain, different types of pain. So this first one that I have, and I'm talking about pain from a wellness person's standpoint, right? I'm not talking about pain from a pain management standpoint, but sometimes we need to talk about it. So, role of resolvins in inflammatory and neuropathic pain. Pharmaceuticals. It's in the Journal of Pharmaceuticals, October 2023, Volume 16, Number 10, Article 1366. That's where we get it. And several authors here. This article cites 135 references. The review aimed to evaluate the literature surrounding the resolvins in inflammatory and neuropathic pain. This review summarizes the studies on the anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects of resolvins, one of the specialized pro-resolvin mediators synthesized from, here we go again, our favorite substance on earth, omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, fish oil, right? Once again, and I'm sorry that we have another article, just like we talked about yesterday on Dr. Hyman's Instagram page, where he gave us migraines, cell protection, and something else that was increased with omega-3 fatty acids. And I'm not trying to talk about this article because it says omega-3 fatty acids. I'm just simply trying to talk about pain, and that can't get away from it. It's like, because the people that study it and the people that know and this is in pharmaceuticals of all things, right? This is not a necessarily a health and wellness journal, but the review summarizes the studies of the anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects of resolvins, one of the specialized pro-resolving mediators synthesized from omega-3 fatty acids. So it gets in and talks about nociceptive pain, inflammatory pain, and neuropathic pain. And what are the differences of those things? Like if you step on a person's toe, you cause nociceptive pain. There's some irritation of the nerves right there, and that's called nociceptive pain. Inflammatory pain is hitting a person's toe with a hammer and causing tissue damage. Recovery requires the resolution of the inflammatory process. We didn't have this show going on during the COVID pandemic in 2020, but on our Facebook page, I spent a lot of time trying to talk about the resolving of the inflammatory process. And one of the things that helps resolve, one of the processes, I'm not going to get into the whole thing because it's very complicated to talk about, but one of the processes that stops inflammatory cytokines and is being able to get the dendritic cells, which pick up a piece of the virus and get it over into the lymph nodes so that your immune response, your secondary immune response can take place, is the speed by which the dendritic cells move and the whole process to get the whole thing calmed down and solved. And if you're low in vitamin D, your dendritic cells move very, very slowly. If you're high in vitamin D, your dendritic cells move very fast. So if we had an invader, it's like Paul Revere, right? Paul Revere, what's the old story? Paul Revere rode and told him that the British are coming, right? The speed of Paul Revere's horse had a lot to do with the response time of to the British are coming. If Paul Revere was riding an old mule that couldn't run worth a flip, it's going to take longer for the news to travel, right? But if Paul Revere is riding Secretariat, the news is going to get there fast, right? And if you guys didn't grow up on a horse ranch, or you're not horse people, or you don't like the racehorse business, whatever, you might not really care about that little story. But I did grow up on a horse ranch, and I do know who Secretariat is, and he's fast. He was fast. So my point of that is, that's one example of how we get inflammatory pain to calm down. Neuropathic pain occurs when nerves itself are injured. So let's just kind of go through some of these key points from the article. Chronic pain is an unpleasant experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Inflammatory pain alerts the body to inflammation and promotes healing. However, unresolved inflammation can lead to chronic pain. Yes, we're constantly talking about that. We do not want to have unresolved inflammation. And that's one of the things I talked to the patient about today. I talked to that, I was like, look, I can't do anything about the rods and screws in your lumbar spine. I can't do anything about the screws in your sacrum. Those are there and they're permanent. But what we might be able to do is change the chemistry around in your body so that we can calm some of that inflammation down, right? Unresolved inflammation can lead to chronic pain. So one of the things is to decrease the inflammation. And when we talked about supplements this week, that was Wednesday night, I think, or I don't know if it was last night or not, but when we talked about supplements, we talked about threshold just a little bit, right? If we're taking something, if we're taking a supplement, and we need a certain amount of threshold of that supplement in order to calm down some of this unresolved inflammation that's causing this chronic pain, then I think what happens, because I asked this patient today, are you taking fish oil? And she said no. And she said, really, I've taken fish oil in the past, and I just really didn't see any help in it. I didn't really notice that it helped me. If you take 500 milligrams of fish oil in a day, and that 500 milligrams of fish oil is, when you look on the back of the bottle, and it says that there is 250 milligrams of EPA and 75 milligrams of DHA, and now that's 325 milligrams, but the rest of it's fluff, right? So basically what you're taking is 325 milligrams of a substance, and you might need 3,000 milligrams of that substance, right? We would be wise to understand that the fish oil in the body works. Fish oil inhibits pain. It's not an opinion that I bring to you on the show. It's a fact that of what's going on. Like it's a literal fact. It's a scientific biochemical fact that EPA inhibits inflammatory markers in the body. So if you're taking fish oil and you're not getting the results that you desire, there is a high possibility that you're not taking enough fish oil. You got to take more. I told this lady, based on her experience and based on what's going on with her, that if she was a patient in my office, I would put her on 6,000 milligrams of fish oil right off the bat. Like, we would just start from the jump with 6,000. I said, how much are you taking? And she said, I don't know, maybe 500. And I was like, okay, well, if you come to the office, if you want to, then first of all, we're going to check your 6:3 ratio. That's one of the first things that we're going to do is actually look at it and see. But we're going to start you on a high level anyway, and we're going to mix it with a double dose of turmeric. And so both of those things are going to get to work to try to handle some of this unresolved inflammation. Neuropathic pain due to somatosensory damage can be a disease in itself. So neuropathic pain due to somatosensory damage can be a disease in itself. That's really interesting too. We can actually have a disease by itself that's nerve pain because of the damage that's been done. So I'll get back to that right after the break. We're going to take a break right here on the radio. This is Jason Clemmons in Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We'll be right back right after these messages. What does that mean? Neuropathic pain due to somatosensory damage can become a disease in itself. Well, if you destroy the nerve, then now you actually have so much damage and sometimes it's irreparable damage to the nerve that now that becomes a disease. So a diabetic person with neuropathy, that type of thing, that can become its own disease in and of itself right there. Inflammation plays a considerable role in the progression of both types of pain, inflammatory and neuropathic pain. Chronic inflammation may occur in cases of unresolved inflammation resulting in chronic pain. Unlike nociceptive and inflammatory pain that arises from disease or tissue damage, neuropathic pain can be a disease in and of itself. Neuropathic pain is generally chronic and is caused by lesions within the somatosensory system, which biodirectionally communicate with the immune system. That's very important. I'm going to read it again. Neuropathic pain is generally chronic and is caused by lesions within the somatosensory. Somatosensory is basically your body talking to your brain, the sensory part of your brain, which is in the parietal lobe, the upper part, your upper brain. The motor cortex is in the frontal lobe of the upper brain. The sensory cortex is in the parietal lobe of the upper brain. So that's why that upper brain activity is so important. Motor is sending from the brain to the body. Sensory is sending from the body to the brain. Okay, that's the conversation we've had multiple times. That's the conversation we've had multiple times about only half your nervous system perceives pain. So when you say I feel fine, you're only describing half of your nervous system. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're talking about pain. And I'm going to read this little sentence for you guys that are on the radio one more time. Neuropathic pain, when we're talking about neuropathic, we're talking about nerve. The genesis of it is the nerve is generally chronic and is caused by lesions within the somatosensory system, meaning the sensory part of your body that is sending information into your brain, which bidirectionally communicates with the immune system. So your somatosensory system communicates with your immune system. Resolvins derived from omega-3 fatty acids actively suppress pro-inflammatory mediators and aid in the resolution of inflammation. I'll say it more simply. Fish oil suppresses inflammation and helps resolve that inflammation. Resolvins alleviate various inflammatory and neuropathic pain models by reducing hypersensitivity and regulating inflammatory cytokines and glial activity in the spinal cord and dorsal root ganglia. Resolvins are a promising alternative for pain management with the potential to reduce the side effects associated with conventional medications. That's a key point. I don't know. I've heard people try to make up some sort of side effect of fish oil. There are some people that are determined that there's some sort of side effect to it, but it's there's it's almost um, it's really hard to cause yourself trouble with fish oil. It is. Um, Marine natural products are derived from marine life that is distributed in the oceans. They include omega 3s. Omega 3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are precursors of resolvins, are representative of these fish oils. Omega 3s are precursors of several types of specialized pro resolving mediators that contribute to anti inflammatory action, such as protectins and resolvins. Omega 3 fatty acids are primarily acquired through dietary sources encompassing fish, fish oils, seafood, and some plants. And this is a huge sentence right here. Because it cannot be endogenously synthesized within the human body, omega 3 must be acquired through dietary intake. We can't make it ourselves. We have to eat it like we've been eating it for thousands and thousands of years. We've been eating fish, right? These fatty acids serve as a substrate for synthesizing resolvins, lipid mediators derived from omega 3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. Resolvins are typically biosynthesized from omega 3 fatty acids and commonly extracted from EPA and DHA. Resolvins play a critical role in resolving various inflammation-related physiological responses. So I think we get it right there, right? Like, and here's another one. Resolvins have emerged as promising therapeutic agents for pain management by specifically targeting inflammatory processes. The research I have is that EPA beats pain management 88% of the time. And I wonder what happened in that other 12 times. Must have been super severe for that to happen in those other times right there. So when we're dealing with pain, that we really need to suppress it. We really need to get those fish oils. Circulating levels of resolvins significantly reduce inflammation-related diseases such as aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage, brain hemorrhage, acute myocardial infarction, bipolar disorder, irritable bowel syndrome. Let me say that again. Let me just pull those two things together. Resolvins are typically biosynthesized from omega 3 fatty acids. You take your fish oil, you end up with resolvins. Circulating levels of resolvins significantly reduce inflammation-related diseases such as brain hemorrhage, acute myocardial infarction, heart attacks, bipolar disorder, irritable bowel syndrome. Why? Why? Because inflammation causes problems in the body. What causes inflammation to decrease? Omega 3 fatty acids. But here's the key. The key to that little sentence right there to me is circulating levels of resolvins significantly reduce inflammation. Low circulating levels of resolvins may not. It may work for one person just fine, but it might not work for the other person as much. The other person may need to increase the fish oil that they take and keep increasing it and keep increasing it. Resolvins actively suppress the production of inflammatory mediators such as cytokines and chemokines. Right? Traditional non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as COX inhibitors have been used to manage inflammatory pain. However, the side effects, including gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, hepatic, renal, cerebral, and pulmonary complications, have been reported in multiple placebo-controlled trials and meta-analysis. Only minor side effects resulting from prolonged systemic intake of omega-3s have been reported. No systemic side effects have been reported with the use of resolvins. I mean, We know that, right? We've broken down acetaminophen multiple times. We talked about ibuprofen multiple times. There are side effects to those drugs, and we don't necessarily have to deal with them, right? Function of resolvins in neuropathic pain. Neuropathic pain is caused by damage or disease affecting the somatosensory system, injury to the nerve itself. Resolvins have an analgesic effect on neuropathic nerve injury. Resolvins are endogenous compounds that offer a promising therapeutical potential and an alternative to conventional pain medications, presenting the advantage of reduced side effects commonly associated with current treatments. Resolvins show remarkable efficacy in alleviating both inflammatory and neuropathic pain by regulating immune and glial cells, thereby resolving inflammation in the nervous system. That's a key point. And then there's 2 books, A Silent Fire. Maybe you guys that are out there can hear that, can see that. The book is called A Silent Fire, The Storm of Inflammation, Diet, and Disease by Shilpa Ravella, Shilpa A Silent Fire. And then the other book is The Logic of Immunity, Deciphering an Enigma by B.J. Sherrill. So there's an article right there for you. So we're talking about 3 types of pain: nociceptive pain, inflammatory pain, and neuropathic pain. So let's go to another one right here, another article that I've got. The interface of mechanics and nociception to joint pathophysiology, insights from the facet and TMJ, the joint, right? This is the Journal of Biomechanical Engineering, February 2017, volume 139, number 2, and you can find it right there. These authors are all authors are from the University of Pennsylvania, from the Department of Bioengineering, Neurosurgery, and School of Dental Medicine. These studies cite 174 references. This work was funded by grants from the National Institutes of Health. This study reviews the mechanical, chemical, and neurological mechanisms contributing to synovial joint pain. A synovial joint is a joint of 2 bones that come together that has a capsule that has liquid inside the capsule. Synovial joints. That's synovial joints are joints that will release a sound, that will pop, right? You'll get that popping sound when you release that synovial joint. You've got synovial joints all along your spine. And we know about the pain. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience that occurs when there is potential for tissue damage to occur or in response to an inciting injury, as from osteoarthritis. Now, let me say something right there, because this is a key point to me. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Listen to those words. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Where do we generate emotions from? Right? Well, there's a really cool book called The Molecules of Emotion that Candace Pert wrote. I don't know, I think in the 60s or something like that. You can look at it. We talked about it when I was in chiropractic school. The molecules of emotions, and a lot of those molecules are stored in the spinal cord, the central nervous system. The central nervous system is emotional experiences that occurs when there's a potential for tissue damage, pain. So if a person is going through a very emotional problem, they will have a heightened sensory output. There will be more sensation, there will be more pain with a person that's dealing with emotions than a person that's not dealing with emotions. That's part of the reason I think that I could play football for 19 years, or however long I played football, from first grade all the way through 5 years of college. That's 17 years, 16 years. Played football for 16 years because I didn't play in 5th grade. No, 6th grade. So I wasn't emotional. I wasn't emotional when I got hit. I just got hit, right? So there was physical, there was unpleasant sensory, Some of it was quite unpleasant. Pain is an unpleasant sensory. I could have flashbacks right now about some of the unpleasant sensory. I was actually talking about this exact thing this week. I was talking to a girl who's a goalie. I mentioned her last night, but she's like 12 years old. She's a goalie of the soccer team, and she was diving, causing that physical stress that she hurt that her side right above her hip. And she said she came out. Her mom told me that she came out of the game crying because it was hurting so bad and she was having a spasm. And I just looked at her and I was like, "There's no crying in soccer. What the heck?" And then there was a laugh, and everybody was. And I said, "No, actually, uh, there's not any crying in football either." But I remember crying in football, being tackled one day because we had a cable that ran around the outside of our high school. And when I was in the fifth grade, we practiced inside, right outside we practiced on the high school grounds, but it was inside that cable. And it was like it was a thick cable, and it ran all the way around the school. And it had like little telephone poles every, I don't know, 10 yards or something. And, the telephone pole was buried in the ground, and they drilled a hole through there, and then they ran the cable through that telephone pole, and it went all the way around Roswell High School. When I was in fifth grade, we practiced there one day. I mean, that's where our football team practiced. Well, one day I got tackled up against that cable. So I had the ball, and I was running to the sideline, and then they got me, and they had me kind of turned backwards, and the back of my thighs were up against the cable, and they were pushing me. Well, the whistle blew, and they were supposed to stop, but they didn't stop. And when they didn't stop, they pushed me over the back of that cable, and it hurt. But I remember very specifically, and I cried, and I was a quarterback of our team and all that sort of thing, but I was in the fifth grade and it hurt. But the reason I cried was because they didn't stop on the whistle, and they broke the rules, and they weren't supposed to do that, and they were being unfair to me, and I was a victim in the moment. And the reason I cried is because I was emotional about the pain. I wasn't really crying because of the sensory aspect of the pain, even though I had bruises on the back of my legs. It wasn't the sensory part of the pain that made me cry. It was the fact that I was being mistreated by my teammates that made me cry. That's the truth. It's transparent. That's the truth. And so, whatever. But the point of that is, when we're dealing with two things at the same time, when we're dealing with sensory pain and emotional pain, it makes the pain worse. It's harder on us to do that. It's way better to just deal with the sensory pain by itself and leave the emotional pain out. And that's what I told her. I said, "Look, I can't do anything about the rods and screws in your lumbar spine. I can't do anything about the screws in your sacrum. Those things are there. But what we might be able to do is we might be able to decrease the amount of chemistry that's causing pain by resolvins, right? We might be able to decrease the amount of chemistry, and that takes two of us together, because you need to quit drinking Cokes and sugar and eating sugar and high inflammatory foods, right?" And she said to me, "But I eat those things because I'm so depressed, and it's just the only thing that gets me through. Like, it's so hard to get through the day, and so sometimes I just have to go drink a Coke." Yes. And what do we know? The ones of us that watch this show over and over and over again, what's going on with her? She's overactivated in her right hemisphere because she's living in an unknown world, because she has a lot of things going on in her life that she can't control, and she can't figure out how they're going to work out. She's overactivated in her right hemisphere, which means she's underactivated in her left hemisphere, which means she's low on her dopamine on the left side, which means she goes to an external source looking for the dopamine. So how should I approach the case? What should I do to help her? Should I be like every other doctor she's gone to and look at her as a low back paying person? Or should I start with her brain? And that's what I told her. Look, everybody else looks at your low back. No one's looking at your brain. If we started with your brain and we fired it properly, and we fired it from right side to left side, and we increased the internal dopamine in your brain, we might be able to get you to not desire sugar and carbonated drinks that are full of sugar and corn chips that are full of omega-6s and high in omega-6 foods, right? We might be able, if we could get your left brain to fire by getting the information out of your right brain, we might be able to give you internal dopamine sources that cause you to stop searching for them, which decreases the inflammatory markers, that chemistry that causes your body to be more inflamed. Then we might be able to just deal with the sensory component and not the emotional component. If we could decrease the anxiety and the depression and the ADD by getting the brain to fire properly, then we wouldn't have to deal with the emotional part of the pain. If I would have just run over there, tripped, and fell over that fence, I wouldn't have cried that day. Even though I got bruises on my legs. I had bruises on my arms. I had bruises on my knees. I had bruises all kinds of places. I won't cry because of bruises, right? If I had just had the sensory part and not the emotional part, then I would have been able to handle it. And I think the same thing can go for that person. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean when it just stacks and stacks and stacks on top of each other. It's like it all comes back to the same thing. It all comes back to eat well, move well, think well. Get on your feet, do the things, right? That's what it comes back to. So I'll get on with it. But pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. The experience of pain includes both sensory and emotional components as modulated by specific brain regions. Brain regions. A combination of sensory, emotional, and cognitive aspects of pain contributes to the complexity of chronic pain. This is from the Journal of Biomechanics and Engineering, February 2017. A combination of sensory, emotional, and cognitive aspects of pain contributes to the complexity of chronic pain. Chronic joint pain is a costly and widespread problem affecting 110 million adults in the United States at some point over the course of their lifetime and having an estimated total cost of $60 billion. Chronic joint pain is a widespread problem that frequently occurs with aging and trauma. Pain occurs most often in synovial joints. Trauma and repeated loading can induce structural and biomechanical changes in joints, altering their microenvironment and modifying the biomechanics of their constitutive tissues, which themselves are innervated. That's a big old fancy high dollar sentence right there. But what does it mean? Trauma and repeated loading, physical trauma, and repeated abnormal movement, which we in the world of chiropractic call a subluxation, abnormal movement of a joint, can induce structural and biochemical changes. Biochemical means the chemistry around the joint, altering the little small environment and changing the movement of the tissues that are around the joint. So she said, well, it was the degeneration that caused my back pain. And I guess she said, but you could see it on the MRI. You could see where the compression of, because there wasn't any space and the bones had moved and there was compression of the nerve, and they showed it to me and that said that's why my back hurt. And I was like, okay. I suppose because I had just told her that you didn't get back pain before you had abnormal brain function. You had abnormal brain function first, then you got back pain. And she was like, well, they showed me the where I had the degeneration. And I'm like, yes, but why did the bones move in the first place? And what were the two things that caused that to deteriorate? And it was abnormal biomechanics, abnormal movement, and abnormal chemistry. And both of those things are affecting the brain. The brain wasn't able to treat the joint properly. The joint became deteriorated. And then we started to have some problems, right? So, peripheral pain sensors can become activated in response to changes in the joint microenvironment and relay pain signals to the spinal cord and brain where pain is processed and perceived. Again, right? We know that. We've just been talking about that. In some cases, pain circuitry is permanently changed, which may be a potential mechanism for sustained joint pain. In some cases, it is. In some cases, it is. It's permanently changed. It's just really hard when that is the case. So we want to make sure that it is. If we want to make sure that instead of just being told that it is, we want to make sure that there's nothing else we can do. And one of those things that we could do is see if we could increase our circulating resolvins by increasing our omega-3s. It is most likely that alterations in both the joint microenvironment and the central nervous system contribute to chronic pain. Yes. See how much time we got. About 2 minutes. See if I can get permanent changes in joint structure and pain signaling may occur following joint injury and osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis, watch out for that word. Synovial joints permit complex motion and often sustain loads several times greater than the weight of the human body. Repeated mechanical loading above the normal physiological conditions contribute to an initiation of acute tissue damage and degeneration. The local mechanical environment of joints can be substantially altered after injury or degeneration, which can produce dysfunctional nociceptive signaling. Yes, that's true. It can cause you if they're not functioning properly, but it's about the function. You got to get them to function. Neck pain is among the most prevalent chronic joint pathologies, with 30 to 50% of the adult population reporting pain over a 12-month period. Neck pain is the most often induced by trauma and can involve damage like loading and stretching of the facet capsular ligament to the bilateral facet joints that provide articulations between spinal levels. The facets are the synovial parts of the neck. You lose the proper motion of the neck. You lose the proper curve of the neck. You change the dynamics of the joint itself. You can increase the pain and change the way that it fires. Neck pain can also result from non-traumatic cumulative exposures such as sustained neck flexion postures like this. Look at your children. If you have children, look at your children tonight. And if they are doing this with their head down, had one this week in my office. Little kid came in, is taking care of his mom and his sister, and the little guy comes in and he sits in the chair and looks at the phone with his head down like that. Right? Innervation by mechanoreceptors, disruption of the collagen fibers that make up the facet capsular ligament can initiate nociceptive signaling and lead to both acute and chronic pain. I'll say it again. Innervation, the nervous system. Innervation to the mechanoreceptors, by mechanoreceptors, can change it and lead to chronic pain. Hey, that's all I got. The clock got me tonight. And that's all I got for you, but we'll probably hit this again next week. I'll save these articles for us next week. You guys have a great weekend. Let's go get those horns tonight, and I hope you guys stay safe. Everybody traveling for spring break, I hope you stay safe, and we'll be back Monday night at 6 with Life with Jason Clemmons, DC.